Good evening and welcome to the LaRouche Organization Symposium. I'm Diane Sare, president of the LaRouche Organization, and this evening I actually will not be joined by Vanessa Beeley, who was to have been with me today because since Israel began striking Iran last night and now Iran is striking back Israel, she is in Lebanon and had various things to check up on. So instead, what I'm going to do is give you my view of the current strategic situation, and some of it may be of surprise to you. Obviously, many people are talking about regime change. We want a regime change against Iran, a regime change in Russia. No one's talking about, or any sane person, a regime change with China, although there is discussion of war with China over Taiwan, etc. The actual issue is regime change in the United States. And I don't just mean President Trump personally, although some of the statements he's been making and his behavior as whatever, in collusion with or duped by the pro-British Empire Zionist lobby, whatever it is not helping his cause. The issue is that the presidency of the United States has the capability, in concert with Russia, China, and India, as LaRouche said, a four-power agreement, to reorganize, and especially now that you have the whole BRICS process, the international security and economic order. And this is long overdue. The transatlantic financial system is now a bubble which cannot possibly be saved, whether you raise interest rates, lower interest rates. Some of these things may crash it sooner, but none of these things will actually save it. You're going to have to put the whole entire transatlantic system, dollar-based system, through a bankruptcy reorganization. The Glass-Steagall Act is the crucial component of that, and you're going to have to go through the books of the banks and sort out legitimate debt from illegitimate debt. We're going to have to bankrupt the Federal Reserve. We need a national bank. We need the capacity to direct credit. We need, and one of the reasons you need large economies like China, Japan, Russia, others, is we have to go back to a fixed exchange rate system. No more gambling with other nations' currencies, something that George Soros was particularly good at. You want nations to have stability. You want nations to be able to plan 25 and 50 years ahead, development programs for the well-being of their people. If you actually want peace, that is the approach. So the most important aspect, or what the United States could be doing, is to be in a dialogue, to be on the same page with the other major powers, Russia, the leading nuclear power with the most nuclear weapons, or the most advanced nuclear weapons, as Putin said, and China, which frankly has a larger economy than the United States in terms of production. If those three nations are on the same page, there's nothing on the planet we cannot solve. Now, that thought puts the British Empire and their financial tentacles, think BlackRock, think World Economic Forum, in an apoplectic rage fit. So the fact that President Trump had conversations with Putin and Xi Jinping in the last days is very important, and I don't find it surprising. I know Trump said that there was always a 60-day deadline. He knew Israel was going to strike, which frankly just makes him rather complicit, because we all know that if the United States told Israel not to do this, or we're going to cut off military aid, Israel would not have done it. But nonetheless, it blows up exactly when we have a potential to forge that kind of relationship. I think President Putin in particular is very aware of this. He is going to work very hard to not allow obstacles, even very dangerous situations like that unfolding in Southwest Asia now, where Iran is retaliating against Israel, and we really don't know where this is going to go. But Russia is going to try very hard to keep a level head and to somehow, in spite of all of this, normalize relations with the United States. Now, what I wanted to do is just go through a few things to make very, very clear what I mean by this and why it's so important that the US presidency be on the right side and that Donald Trump not destroy himself, his legacy, and his presidency by walking straight into a British trap. And by the way, the Brits are experts at profiling people. They know he has a big ego. They know he doesn't like to read, that he's not going to dig deep into these strategic process. That's probably why Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, made a video on her personal account after having visited Hiroshima, warning of the dangers of nuclear war and making a very sharp point that the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima is 1/14 of the size of the average nuclear bombs we would be using today, which would be much more lethal. So let's take a little bit of a tour here with what some people are saying about the current situation. So from Colonel Douglas McGregor, he said, June turned out to be Iran's Pearl Harbor. Iran will now react as we did in 1942, but it was 41, when we were caught napping. What was limited to the region between Israel and Iran will now become regional. Trump's statements after the fact are an admission of his own level of complicity in the attacks. The quote unquote talks with Iran were a ruse. Witkoff, like most of the Trump administration, was an agent of Israel and Netanyahu. This is the beginning of a regional war that will involve the United States, Russia, as well as the whole Islamic world. As Dan McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute pointed out this morning, the similarities between the Israeli use of drones inside Iran with the Ukrainian spiderweb attack inside Russia are striking. Finally, Americans are now expect terrorist attacks on soft targets inside the USA. Soft targets include, at a minimum, nuclear reactors, military installations, power grids, and shopping malls. That is certainly an alarming perspective and possibly true. We'll see. I think that Russia and the US, Trump is open to working with Putin. He said he didn't want this war, but it's clearly escalating, and we'll see where it goes. I don't know that that's the form that it will take, but clearly very dangerous. Everything can spin out of control. Now, just a couple of things I thought I should tell you. Of course, according to the IDF, Israel was just launching, quote, a precise preemptive strike on Iran with the goal of damaging Iran's nuclear program. They killed the head of the Iranian National Guard and the next in command. They killed at least 6 of the top nuclear scientists, many civilians. They were striking urban areas, and they were saying that this could go on for weeks. So it is not surprising. You have to say, well, how much is Iran supposed to take before they retaliate? Russia urged restraint, and we will get to that in a minute. Now, Bibi Netanyahu, who probably hopes that Iran will strike Americans and American targets because he wants the United States to be pulled into this war, made it a point of thanking Donald Trump for his steadfast support. So Netanyahu is trying to make the United States a target in this. For his part, Rubio said that the United States was not involved in this. And I think I have his comments, but I guess I'll pull them up later. Oh, there it is. Yeah, right here. So here is what Rubio had to say about the matter. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Israel took, quote unquote, unilateral action against Iran tonight, stressing that the United States was not involved and warning that Tehran should not target the U.S. in response. Quote, Our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Israel advised us that they believed this action was necessary for their self-defense, unquote. So Rubio admits that Israel told us we were going to do it and that he is in support of that, which is completely insane. He, as Scott Ritter said, is probably more destructive of the Trump administration and world peace than Mike Pompeo, and that is not an exaggeration. He said, going on, President Trump and the administration have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Who are our regional partners? Pretty soon, the only regional partner, I think, is going to be Israel. And that's not so great. He said, let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. Okay, so those are the comments from Rubio. Now, I want to go back to something else, which I found very striking, which was the map, because I have had Vanessa Beeley on before. We were talking about what happened in Syria, and of course, it seemed odd how easily these ISIS forces took over Syria. We know the British were involved very deeply. When I interviewed her a few weeks ago, she said that Jonathan Powell, the top aide to former British Prime Minister and warmonger Tony Blair, has been all over Damascus. In fact, he was there a few weeks ago, and that the hotels in Damascus are overflowing with Brits. But look at this map and think about one of the things that may have been going on. Here we have it. Possible routes for Israeli attacks on Iranian nuclear program. Well, the route going through Jordan and Iraq, probably Jordan and Iraq would not want to be complicit in this attack on Iran, neither would Saudi Arabia. But isn't that convenient? You can go from Israel over Syria to Iran. So if you can have Syria controlled by ISIS, which, by the way, collaborates with the IDF, that's right, by a terrorist, in effect, if you can have Syria under your control, then you can get at Iran without issue. So that's the point. I think it's very striking, and she and I will be talking tomorrow, so there'll be more on the LaRouche organization website in that regard. Now, what else do we have in this situation? So was it a ruse? Colonel McGregor said that the talks were a ruse. Here is the Times of Israel reporting on the conversation that Trump had with Bibi Netanyahu on the phone. They say Trump said to have told Netanyahu to end Gaza war and attacking Iran off limits for now. Is that true? Did Trump actually tell him that? As I said, I think everyone knows that Trump could have unequivocally told him not to do it. And if there were the appropriate sanctions threatened, he would not have done it. Was this a lie? The point about the ruse is that some people are saying, well, we misled Iran by saying that we were going to have the talks in Oman on Sunday. And since Iran was expecting the talks, they were not expecting the attack. So that's very misleading. Was that done deliberately? Probably by some in the Trump administration, maybe not others. Let's see what I have here next. Yes, so Trump then tells the Post, I always knew the date for Israel attack on Iran, again, making it sound rather like he's complicit in this thing. Not good. Now, here is what Trump had to say this morning. I gave Iran a chance after chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words, just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse for them than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by far, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come. and they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Just do it before it's too late. God bless you all. So one wonders if President Trump has any clue with whom he is speaking, if he thinks there's no pride, and Bibi Netanyahu, who we know is completely off his rocker and just basically trying to stay out of jail, suffering from prostate cancer, I believe, and a criminal mind and personality, he now has issued calls to the Iranian people for regime change. Like, if someone was bombing the United States, no matter how much you might have hated the president, whether it was Obama or Trump or any president that people may have not liked, you would, if someone was bombing your country, would you go and overthrow your president? No, you would unite to save your country against the people bombing you. And that's what I'm saying. These people clearly have no understanding of natural law or how things work, which is why the various nuclear war scenarios are so extremely dangerous. And again, let me underscore, the point of all of this is to destroy the United States, to destroy the Trump presidency, destroy any, if there was any shred of why anyone would trust us, to make sure that they never trust us and nothing will be able to be resolved. Okay, that's Rubio's comments, which we already have. Now, this is from the Russian Foreign Ministry this morning. Very, very level-headed, and I think gets at certain points, including their very peculiar timing of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, on suddenly declaring Iran to be in violation. We have just heard repeatedly, in fact, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, briefed the Congress that Iran was not in violation. They were complying with the inspections, but suddenly the IAEA says they are in violation. So the Russian Foreign Ministry this morning at 12:14, which would be about, I guess, 5 a.m. our time, we express our profound concern regarding the dangerous escalation of tensions in the Middle East. We strongly condemn the military actions undertaken by the State of Israel on the night of June 13th, which constitute a clear violation of the UN Charter, as well as established principles of international law. Unprovoked military strikes against the sovereign member state of the United Nations, against its citizens, peaceful cities, and critical nuclear energy infrastructure facilities are totally unacceptable. The international community must not ignore such acts, which not only jeopardize peace, but also undermine security both in the region and globally. The timing of these attacks appears to be particularly cynical, as they have occurred amidst a session of the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency and just ahead of the next round of indirect talks between representatives of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States. These actions have drastically undermined the progress of painstaking multilateral diplomatic efforts aimed at reducing tensions and seeking solutions to eliminate suspicions and the bias surrounding Iran's peaceful nuclear program. I'm going on. This is not on the screen. It is evident that West Jerusalem has made a deliberate decision to further escalate the situation and raise the stakes. And they say later, we strongly believe that regardless of any justifications that may be offered by those who planned, developed, and carried out the attacks, the issue of the Iranian nuclear program cannot and must not be resolved by military means. A sustainable settlement is only possible through peaceful political and diplomatic efforts. We sincerely hope that this understanding will ultimately prevail. We call on the parties to exercise restraint and avoid further escalation and prevent a full-scale war in the region. Now, the Russian deputy chair of the National Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, writes on Telegram, "I am often accused of nuclear fear-mongering." Well, there you go. When I talk about nuclear conflicts, it's not just talk. This threat is real and it can happen fast. Nobody needs that. And here we will come to this in just a minute, which is Tucker Carlson's latest comment. But I just want to say that President Putin spoke both with the leaders of Iran and Israel. And let me see if I can find that actually. Here it is. So you know what he said. He spoke with Netanyahu. He spoke with Pezeshkian earlier today. And the readout from the Kremlin website is, in light of the dangerous escalation resulting from Israel's act of force against Iran, Vladimir Putin had telephone conversations with the president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, and Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. The president of Russia expressed his condolences to the authorities and citizens of Iran over the heavy death toll resulting from Israeli strikes, including among civilians. Vladimir Putin stressed that Russia condemned Israel's actions, which had been carried out in violation of the UN Charter and international law. The Russian side has been fully supporting the efforts to resolve the situation around Iran's nuclear program peacefully and has proposed concrete initiatives aimed at reaching mutually accepted agreements. Russia will continue to promote de-escalation between Israel and Iran, or Iran and Israel. So very sensible, very level-headed. Now, I just want to go back to what we went to before. So you see what I mean by it's really a fight. It's an incredible battle going on, and Trump going with this British imperial Zionist war agenda is alienating his own base. What do I mean? Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has posted on X on now several occasions saying, "I represent the base. People voted for you to end endless wars. We don't know why we're being asked to defend a nation which has its own nuclear weapons against another nation, neither of which is threatening us." And the nation which has its own nuclear weapons is, of course, Israel. And then Tucker Carlson, and as I said, Tulsi was taking a lot of heat. So let me just show you what Tucker Carlson put out this morning on his own news service, Morning Note. This could be the final newsletter before all-out war. And at the end of his Morning Note, he writes the following. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first, America first. That's a direct quote from Donald Trump's first inaugural address, and it's the same sentiment that thrust him back into the White House in January. Now the world will find out if he really meant it. Now that Benjamin Netanyahu, hold on a second. Now that Benjamin Netanyahu and his war-hungry government have executed their long-awaited assault, the president faces a legacy-altering decision to support or not support. We'd like to take this opportunity to state our position as clearly as possible, and this is in bold. The United States should not at any level participate in a war with Iran. No funding, no American weapons, no troops on the ground. Regardless of what our special ally says, A fight with the Iranians has nothing to offer the United States. It is not in our national interest. If Israel wants to wage this war, it has every right to do so. It is a sovereign country and it can do as it pleases, but not with America's backing. Now, this is Tucker Carlson speaking, not me, just to be very clear. At an absolute minimum, the United States continuing to insert itself in this conflict will further whip up the radical Islamic world's hatred for the West and fuel the next generation of terrorism, just what Colonel McGregor was warning. The worst case, thousands of immediate American deaths in the name of a foreign agenda that has nothing to do with our country. It goes without saying that neither of those possibilities would be beneficial for the United States. But there's another option, and again in bold, drop Israel. Let them fight their own wars. No matter how many bogus anti-Semitism allegations neocon ghouls like Mark Levin hurl at Americans who advocate for that path, opposing destroying the United States in the name of the Netanyahu government has nothing to do with Israel. It's about America. We reject the idea of involving the U.S. in an Israeli war for the same reason we would stand against doing the same thing on behalf of Eritrea, Suriname, Cambodia, or any other random country you could close your eyes and point at on a map. It is not America's fight. Engaging in it would be a middle finger in the faces of the millions of voters who cast their ballots in hopes of creating a government that would finally put the United States first. What happens next will define Donald Trump's presidency. So it sounds like Tucker Carlson agrees with me that President Trump is right now on a trajectory where he is jeopardizing his own presidency, his own legacy, and I will also say the future of the United States. Then further, this is a post on X from Tucker Carlson earlier today. The real divide isn't between people who support Israel and people who support Iran or the Palestinians. The real divide is between those who casually encourage violence and those who seek to prevent it, between warmongers and peacemakers. Who are the warmongers? They would include anyone, I'll say like Senator Lindsey Graham, who's calling Donald Trump today to demand airstrikes and other direct U.S. military involvement in a war with Iran. On that list, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Rupert Murdoch, Ike Perlmutter, and Miriam Adelson. At some point, they will all have to answer for this, but you should know the names now. And I hope they do have to answer for it, and we are still alive. Now, we'll come to the next case. Tulsi Gabbard, who I already mentioned, put out a video warning of nuclear war just days ago, probably aware that this situation was in the works, that it would could very quickly spiral out of control, as it appears to be doing. We'll see. And this is from the National Review. That's Mark Levin's rag, disgusting neocon piece of garbage. They have a picture of her, a screenshot from the video, and they write the moral vacuum overseeing U.S. national intelligence. And it is a very nasty attack on Tulsi Gabbard and what she had to say about Hiroshima and nuclear war. Here is the guy who wrote the article, Noah Rothman. And he starts it by saying, in answer to a question no one asked. So in other words, who are you, you dumb broad? Why are you getting involved in this discussion? You're just the director of national security. And in answer to a question, I guess he believes women should be seen and not heard, and probably not seen either. In answer to a question that no one asked, Donald Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, released a video message today in which she all but endorsed Barack Obama's revisionist, ahistorical account of the end of the Second World War. So there you have it. And there's a great deal of attacks on Tulsi Gabbard, who, by the way, someone just reminded me today, was a very big supporter of the Glass-Steagall Act, exactly what I said needs to be reinstated if we're going to address the real threat, which is the collapse of the transatlantic financial system. And in case people wonder about Mark Levin, here is Politico. This is 2016. Mark Levin, I won't back Trump in the general. That is the general election. Okay, so next. This is from Russia. So here is from LaRouche. And what I'd like to do is now just shift, because I said, well, what should we be doing? How do you get this under control? LaRouche gave a speech some years ago on a two-state solution, Israel-Palestine. And he said, look, where you have a region, and the British have been playing very nasty games here for a long time, the British and the French, and getting all these little groups, the Kurds and the this and the that, all fighting each other. How do you stop the fighting? How do you get security? And the key, again, is the major powers, the United States, Russia, China in particular, in this case, also India, if you start moving more into Southwest Asia and places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, other places. You need these nations to come together. US, Russia, China absolutely could guarantee the security of Palestinians and Israelis living side by side in two sovereign states governed by their own elected government in beautiful modern cities. If you had that kind of cooperation, you could undo the festering sore created by the poverty division and by Israel's occupation of what should be a Palestinian state, which also has to be recognized. And here is LaRouche's proposal for the world. And I hate to point out, but we've been so busy in all these wars that the United States has not bothered to invest in developing the infrastructure here. And I can tell you, a war with Iran is going to do wonders for the price of gasoline. So get ready for that. Get out your bicycle, and don't try horses, because all the fields have windmills and solar panels on them. We don't have a millimeter of high-speed rail. This is a design produced, I believe, in at least collaboration with Hal Cooper, who passed away just a few years ago, a brilliant railroad engineer, designer. And it shows the pathway. You could literally take a train from New York City straight west up through Alaska, under the Bering Strait in a tunnel into Siberia, down through Europe or through China. You could cross over. And of course, this is why we don't want war with Syria, Iran, Turkey, these areas that are the real crossroads into Africa, and go to the tip of South Africa. Or you could travel from the tip of South Africa to the tip of Argentina by train. And what would that bring in terms of dialogue of civilizations, transport of goods, recognition of the high points of other cultures, of other nations, the eradication of poverty, and how many millions of people would be employed building these corridors? And not to mention, once you start talking about the new cities springing up along these routes, you're talking about billions of decent paying, productive jobs for the world's population. And here is what the LaRouche plan, part of it for Southwest Asia, actually looks like. And again, you really see the point of the crossroads here. The blue lines are maritime corridors for shipping, and then black and red are rail corridors, some proposed, some existing. I think the dotted lines have not yet been built. But you see why these areas were home to ancient, in some cases, very advanced civilizations, because exactly they were the cross-section between so many different cultures, religions, language groups, etc. And imagine if the United States were collaborating with China and Russia in building all of this. Well, guess what? We probably wouldn't put up with the crazy lack of modern infrastructure in our own country if that were the case. Let's see the next slide. And here is the OASIS plan, which we want urgently to put on the table. Israeli-Palestinian states side by side, irrigated by massive amounts of fresh water, high-speed rail connecting the West Bank and Gaza, a canal, not the Ben Gurion Canal, not a shipping canal, a small canal from the Mediterranean to the Dead Sea. You have a 400-meter drop, could generate massive amounts of hydroelectric power. And the way you get peace is don't have people living in refugee camps. Have them living in beautiful modern cities, science cities, cultural cities, classical orchestras, opera companies. Certainly the younger people in both Israel and Palestine, many of them want peace. They don't know why they should be in a state of perpetual war. And you need a very bold plan for economic development, which is what LaRouche has been calling for. Oh, yes. And here I wanted to just show this because I think it's very exciting. This is the Al-Dabaa nuclear power plant, which Russia is building in Egypt. It will be the largest nuclear power facility in all of Africa. Russia has pledged to light up Africa with all kinds of investments in energy, nuclear power in particular. And what you may not be aware of is Egypt is actually right now, I think, building 20 new cities. So I don't give this report to say that everything is hopeless. It's not hopeless. It's very hopeful. There is great potential if the United States can be shifted. But it is very important to know, and I believe, frankly, that the universe is just. I think God made the universe in such a way that you cannot inflict or impose harm or injustice without experiencing it yourself at some point in the present or the future. So if we act as a British colonial power to plunge the world into war, to loot, to be the global hegemon, what ultimately will happen is we will destroy ourselves. We will destroy the United States. We will destroy future generations. If instead we collaborate with Russia, with China to end war and to develop the world with great projects, which will definitely inspire young people, will raise the entire standard of education in this nation, and bring goodwill from people abroad back to the United States, then we could have a very bright future. I thought that was what President Trump wanted to do. He is currently on a trajectory of losing all of that and alienating himself from the base who voted for him, which is very dangerous. So it is up to everyone watching this to please join the activity of the LaRouche organization, the Schiller Institute. Tune in. As I said, tomorrow I will be on with Vanessa Beeley. Please visit the Schiller Institute, schillerinstitute.com, and check out the International Peace Coalition phone call from today, which was quite intense. And do take this very seriously. Once you cross the line of warfare, of armed conflict, what happens next is very unpredictable. It takes a great effort to stop it from escalating out of control. So we are definitely in a very dangerous situation, a very unpredictable situation. I still believe that there are many people who don't want this to escalate further, but the United States has a key role to play. So please call your senators, tell them to not act like Lindsey Graham. We don't want war. This is not our war. The statement by Tucker Carlson is clear. I have some differences with his approach, but because I believe it actually is in the interest of all nations to work in the interests of all nations. And I think that was the intention of John Quincy Adams and George Washington, that the United States was to be a bulwark against the British colonial method that we see in such ugly, horrific form right now in the Middle East today, particularly in Gaza. So thank you very much for tuning in, and watch this space for more developments and updates.